We're going to get into the Word. Last week, Pastor George, man, he brought it, right? And I love, because we're starting this new series on the life of Christ, the life of Jesus. A lot of times, and this is nothing wrong with this, sometimes we can limit our view of Jesus only to the cross and the resurrection. And that is a major thing that we should always focus on, okay? So don't get it twisted. Don't think that I'm saying something that I'm not, okay? We should always rejoice and bring people to the cross and show them the power of the resurrection, right? But there's also 3 years of Jesus' life that are very important for us today. And we want to grow in our walk with Jesus. Does anybody else want to grow? I think last week, what did you say, George? You said something like, some of us, we might be in second grade, and we make mistakes in second grade, like, hey, I'm in second grade. Look, as a fourth grader, right, I have a lot to learn too, okay? It's not like I'm always wanting to grow. I'm just a fourth grader in Jesus, okay? And so we should always have this mindset of, Lord, I want more of you, and I want to become more like you, right? And so that's what our vision of this year is we want to be a disciple of Jesus. And who better to look at than the life of Jesus and what it looks like to walk like him, right? One of my favorite passages in the Bible is 1 John 2:6, where it says, anyone who abides in him, who says that they love Jesus, must also walk like Jesus walked. So we want to walk like Christ. That's what we want to look like. We want, at the end of the year, people to look at you and say, man, I understand Jesus died 2,000 years ago, but man, you look a lot like him, right? You talk like him, you walk like him, you love like him, you pray like him, you have authority, like you speak with authority of the scriptures like him. It's like we all want that. I don't just want that for Pastor George. I don't want that just for me. I don't want that just for a few I want that for all of us, that we can walk and know who our Lord is with confidence, right? And so that's where we're going. And last week he talked about the commitment side of things. What are you willing to part with? What are you nurturing? Because whatever you nurture, it's going to grow. So if you nurture your relationship with Jesus, guess what? There's going to be growth there. If you nurture your relationship with video games, that's going to grow. I remember being in college, early college, definitely my BC days, right? I had gotten introduced to a game called, maybe you've heard of it, it's not that popular, but Call of Duty, right? I didn't play video games much as a kid. I was like ripping and running all the time, and so I didn't have a lot of time. I got introduced to Call of Duty, and I remember I became infatuated with it. I was so happy that I was like in the top 3% in the world. I would look at my ranking every day like, oh yeah, look at me, I'm so good. Like, I became infatuated with it. And I just nurtured that, and guess what? I grew into being just this Call of Duty person that was wasting my life completely, right? Whatever you nurture, it's going to grow. Some people are like, well, you could kind of nurture it a little bit. No, whatever you nurture, it's going to grow. And we want to nurture our relationship with Christ. That's what we want to do. I'll tell you, I'm not sure about you, but one of the most fascinating things about Jesus for me, whenever I got saved, was his seriousness about himself. I remember as a kid growing up, I went to church. I grew up in church, right? My mom drugged me to church every single week. Every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday, and then the youth on Fridays, right? I was drugged she might have drugged me to get there. But, she would bring me to church every week. And even though it did not click, parents, drag your children to church every week. Get them in there, because all of a sudden that light bulb did go off for me. But I remember one of the things I remember growing up as a kid, I always heard the stories of Jesus. And I had this image of Jesus and who he was. He had beautiful long brown hair, right? Beautiful, perfect blue eyes. And he was always like holding a sheep or something. Like he was just this compassionate, and I loved that. But I remember when I got saved and I started to read the Gospels, I saw that Jesus was actually pretty serious about himself. In fact, he would tell you to follow him without telling you what that was going to look like, right? He would say, follow me. And then some people would say, well, let me figure this whole thing out. And he'd say, well, you know what? Don't worry about it. Jesus was very serious about your commitment to him. He says, you know what? You're not going to see the end of what your life may look like. But I'm telling you, if you lay down your life for my sake, you will find your life. You will. And that's hard. That's hard because how do you confidently just say to anyone, hey, here's my life, right? And we're going to get into that today because I think Jesus, he wants you to understand that you can trust him, right? And so, the number 7 in the Bible, not just the number 7 in general, is an incredible number. Anybody like their favorite number 7, right? Anybody? Okay, just one. Okay, I thought that was going to be bigger. So nobody likes 7. No, okay. So, yeah, I remember growing up, like anytime I was playing sports, like, yeah, can I get the number 7? Because, it was a special number. And 7 is kind of a big number. There's 7 continents in the world, right? There are 7 wonders of the world. There are 7 colors in the rainbow. There are 7 notes on a musical scale, which is kind of amazing, right? For us musicians in here, like sometimes when we're talking to each other, if you ever look on the back wall during worship, you'll see some numbers up there. It's like 1, 4, 5, 6, 2, And that's because it's telling us the notes on a musical scale. If you're in the key of G, it's the 7 notes are G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, and F. So those are your 7 notes on a musical scale, which I think is amazing. I think it's incredible. Okay, 7 is also, there's 7 days in a week. There are 7 stages of grief, right? Unless psychology has changed that recently. But 7 is also common in the Bible. In fact, if you look throughout the Bible, there's about 700 references to the number 7, right? 7 times the Israelites lapped around Jericho. 7 times was Naaman dipped into the Jordan River to be healed of leprosy. 7 times Elijah prayed for rain. Okay, 7's everywhere when you look at it. And the reason why is because 7 is a number that speaks to completion. It speaks to being full. It speaks to being total. Now, one of my favorite things about 7 in the Bible is that Jesus himself, he told us who he was 7 different times. There are 7 different times in the book of John, the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, I am, and then he explains it. To where we don't have to run around saying, hey, who is Jesus? Who is God? And he's like, well, this is who I am. He doesn't want you to get the wrong interpretation of who he is. He wants you to be confident that you can trust him with your life, okay? I have 3 kids, and my middle child, Rosie. So what's amazing is that all 3 of my kids, they teach me some aspect of God. Some teach me about the love of God. Some teach me about the wrath of God. It's like they all teach me some different aspect. But Rosie, she is my little princess. She's my sweet Rose, okay? And she's helping me cook one day. And in the middle of cooking, I walk out of the room. And as I walk out, I hear some, and I'm like, what is that noise? And I walk back in there, and she's reaching onto our counter, and she's pulling out some candy. See, Rosie loves candy. And so I see her pulling out, and so I'm kind of watching around the corner. As she's pulling out this candy, she's sliding it into her pocket. And I walk and I say, Rosie, what are you doing? And she goes like this. I said, Rosie, what are you doing? She said, nothing, Daddy. I said, Rosie, what did you put in your pocket? There's nothing in my pocket, Daddy. Rosie, why are you standing like that? I always stand like this, Daddy. It's like, Rosie, there's clearly something in your pocket. There's nothing there, Dad. And you can tell she's like terrified right there. So I take her hand, and I'm like, Rosie, and I reach in her pocket, and I pull out this sucker. I said, why did you not ask me for this sucker? And she just starts crying, right? She just starts crying. Oh. And I'm like, Rosie, sometimes how you're acting, that's a lot like how we look like with God. Like we have this fear of God. We have this fear of God that even if we mess up, we have this idea of like hiding. Isn't that so like Adam and Eve? They mess up and they go hiding. And what is God saying? He's like, where are you at? Why are you hiding from me? He knew where they were at. And just like I knew what was in her pocket, right? I knew what was in her pocket, but she was terrified that she was in trouble, that she had she didn't make a mistake, but she was terrified. And I was like, man, how often does that look like us? Because we have an inaccurate view of our God sometimes. And we can live a life of fear. How many of us, when we walk around, especially when we walk around in our prayers, we walking around like this with God. And so I said, Rosie, just ask me. And either I'm going to give you what you asked for, or you know what, I'm going to give you something better. Something that you really do need. So she's like, okay, Dad, can I have that sucker? And I said, sure, darling. And I gave her the sucker. And she said, okay, because I don't need this one then. And she pulled another one out of her pocket. So, yeah, pray for me. But, this idea, I believe that there's two main attacks that Satan will take on all of us. Just two. And you need to be aware of these two attacks. The first attack, I believe, is Satan will try to get you to question what God says about himself. You see that in the Garden of Eden, right? Satan tried to get Eve and Adam to question the integrity of God's word. And he says, did God really say this? He was trying to get them to question what God says about himself, that he is good, that he is going to take care of them. And that's the number one thing that I think Satan will attack. And then the second thing that I think Satan tries to attack is he tries to get you to question what God says about you. Those are the two areas. He wants to get you to question what God says about himself, and he wants you to question what God says about you. And you see that in the temptation of Jesus. Right after Jesus was said that he was the Son of God, right? After he was baptized, the Father came down and he says, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. And then he went into the temptation area in the desert. The first thing that Satan said to him is, if you were really the Son of God, he wanted to question who God said he was. We've got to be aware of the schemes of the enemy. And so what Jesus said is, he said, I want you to know who I am. And so 7 times throughout the Gospel of John, he gives you 7 statements of who he is. One of the ones he says, I am, in John 8:12, he says, I am the light of the world. It says this in 8:12, in John 8:12, it says this, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Do you feel like sometimes you might be stumbling around in the darkness? How many times have we been like that? It's like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't see my purpose. I don't see my hope. I don't see where my trajectory is headed. And he says, well, good news. I'm the one that will light your path. I'm the one that will give you direction. You can have the light of life to guide you. You don't have to stumble around. He says that this is who I am. I am your guide. How many people, before you knew Jesus, you didn't know where you were going, right? You were a mess. And then how many people after you knew Jesus, you kind of still didn't ever know where you were going, but it seemed like you were still headed in a pretty solid direction, right? And I love that about him. He is the light of the world, because what he will also do, what I love about light, is sometimes we look at light to be able to see things that, to guide our path. But I think one of the most important things about light is it shows you also where not to go, right? Or it shows you that the things that you were afraid of are really not as powerful as you think they are. I would not want to be walking on the edge of a cliff without light, right? Because what's that light going to do? Say, oh, that's a bad path right there. And Jesus says, I am the light of the world. You don't have to go fumbling around trying to see, oh, that's a cliff. No, he's like, you trust in me and I will guide you. I will change your heart. Another thing he says in John 10:11, he says, I am the good shepherd. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I am the one that's going to lead you beside still waters. I am the one who will help you to lie down in green pastures. I am the one that will lead you through the valley of the shadow of death. I am the shepherd of your soul. I love the idea of shepherds, because shepherds are meant, as he says, I will light your path, but I will help to lead you on your path. It's not enough sometimes to just see the danger zones, but sometimes we need somebody that's going to take us by our hand and walk with us, and that's exactly what Christ does. He also says, though, right in that same passage, he says, I am the door. In John 10:7, Jesus said to him again, he says, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. I love, that idea of doors. Sometimes we think of doors only as a pathway to go through in and out. But that's not really what the main point of the door is. What a shepherd would actually do is he would lie down on the ground and serve as a door for his sheep. A door was seen as protection, right? That Jesus, he's saying, I will be your protector. Okay, the enemy is trying to come to steal, kill, and destroy. That's why that's written right there in that context, right? The enemy is trying to come in and he's trying to take your life. He's trying to attack you. He's trying to hurt you. He's trying to misguide you. And he says, but if you trust in me, I will serve as this door. I will protect you from the evil one, right? I've come to give you life. I've come to give it to you abundantly. You can trust in me. I am the door. I am the shepherd. I am the light. The fourth thing that he says, I am, you know all this one, the way, the truth, and the life, right? And no one comes to me except through the Father. That's John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And so we say, well, who are you, Jesus? If you ever ask, who are you, Jesus? He says, well, you know who I am? I'm actually the way to God. I am the bridge to God. I am what got you from Lafayette to Baton Rouge. I'm the Atchafalaya Basin Bridge, right? I'm the one that connects you over there. I am the way to him. I am the truth of God. If you want to know who God is, you look at me. You want to know who God is, you read about me. You want to know who God is, you seek me, and you will find the truth of God. I am the life that God wants to give you, is what he says. I like this one too. He says this in John 15:1, the fifth thing that he says about himself. He says, I am the true vine. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. You know, just like fruit cannot stay alive if it's disconnected from the vine, in the same way Jesus says, if you're disconnected from me, you won't have life. He's the sustainer of us. He's the sustainer of our hope in God. He is the sustainer of our faith. He is the one that gets us to the end. That's 1 Peter 1, verse 3 through 5, right? He will make sure that we get through to the end. You know, what happens when something dies? Like if I was to pluck a leaf off of a tree, that leaf is going to be alive for a little bit, right? But eventually what's going to happen? That leaf is going to dry up because it's no longer connected. It's no longer connected. You know, some of the youth here, we were hanging out at this men's advance, and we thought it would be a cool idea if we could start a fire, right? And so we had gotten this bundle of like some tinder, and so we had a magnifying glass, right? And so we're just like getting that thing, and so it starts smoking, and and then all of a sudden this thing, it like catches, right? But the problem is that everything around us was dead. And so it was like, you know, we just throw it, and then, you know, this giant forest fire almost breaks out. We can see the headlines in the papers. Vineyard Church tries to sabotage Assemblies of God gathering and burn down retreat. And we got it out, praise the Lord. But you see what happens? Like death, not connected to the vine, can lead to a lot of destruction. And he's like, so you stay connected to me, and I will sustain you. That's my promise to you. I am the true vine. Then the sixth thing that he said was, I am the resurrection and the life. Now, I use this I am statement in funerals all the time. This is the ultimate game changer, I think, of the Bible, right? Because he's saying, even if you die, if you die, you will live. And that is why the Apostle Paul, you know, we just finished the book of Philippians. That's why he could say things like, rejoice in the Lord always. Why? Because my name is in the book of life. If I die, it doesn't matter. That's the ultimate, like, that's the cap on everything right there. That the enemy thinks he has you, and you say, what you gonna do? You gonna kill me and send me to heaven? Right? We're exactly where I wanna go. That's why it says you're more than a conqueror, that Satan will actually serve you. Like his purposes will actually serve you to get to who you want to go to, right? That's why you're more than a conqueror, because of that statement that he is the resurrection and the life. But what's amazing is that before he gives any of those 6 I am statements, there's one I am statement that he starts with. And this is where I just want to focus the last part of our service on. Before he starts anything, he says, I am the bread of life. It's in John 6. In John 6, he starts this statement by saying, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. How many people have heard of the story about feeding the 5,000? Anybody? Okay. Okay, well, since nobody has heard of it, I'll start from it's 71 verses, so let me just read all 71 real quick, okay? So in this chapter, we've all heard the 5,000. And so what it is that Jesus comes, there's a few loaves, a couple fish, and so God multiplies that. He feeds these 5,000. And so sometimes we can just look at that story as like, wow, that's just another miracle of Jesus. But that's not what the point of that was. You realize that all 71 verses, including that miracle, that sign that took place, Jesus was trying to get them to understand that he was the bread. The main point of John 6 is Jesus, he says, I came to be bread for you, not necessarily to only give you bread. Right? In fact, there's a lot of times where Jesus actually has to take our bread in order for us to understand that he is the bread, right? Sometimes we want, and it's actually blinding us from seeing who Jesus really is. That's the whole point of what that passage is he's trying to get you to realize that he is the bread. That is the main reason that he came here, was to be bread for you. He does care about your body. He does care about your needs. He does care about meeting those needs. But that is not the primary reason on why he came, right? He came to be your source, which is the second main point. He came not to just be useful for you. He came to be precious for you. The point of this passage, he's trying to get you to realize, don't view me as useful. Because Jesus did not come into the world to assist you at getting you the very desires that you have before you became saved. Like his main purpose was not just to come and say, hey, you want to live 180 years? Here, take it. You want all the money in the world? Here, take it. Like he didn't, that was not his primary purpose. That was not it. It was the primary purpose of Jesus coming into the world was to change all of those desires to be one desire. And that's him. That you would view him as this precious treasure, that he would be this treasure hidden in a field. You would stumble upon him and you would say, wow, this is so good. This is so not just useful in my life, but this is my life. This will make my life. Imagine if you stumbled upon $1 billion on the beach. You would say, if I had this would make my life, right? You wouldn't just say, this could be useful for my life. This would change my life. This would completely change my life. So I will gladly sell everything that I have and go and take that treasure. Now, unfortunately, I think a lot of Christians, they know where the treasure is. They see the treasure. They've actually stumbled upon the treasure, but they actually leave the treasure there. They just leave the treasure there. They don't pick up the treasure. Jesus does care about bread. He does. And I believe that, and when I say bread, I mean he cares about your needs. And I believe that we can rest assured that today he can meet your needs. And if he doesn't meet them today, he can meet them tomorrow. If he doesn't meet them then, he can meet them the next day. If he doesn't meet them then, he can meet them sometime in the future until you get to heaven. He will. You can bank that he will meet your needs. He will. But that wasn't his purpose. He starts off in John 6 with a sign. And the sign is that he feeds the 5,000. But what is a sign? On Wednesday, now look, I'm not super calculated, right? But I knew that I was preaching this Sunday. And I knew I was preaching on Sunday. So I thought on Wednesday it would be a great opportunity for me to talk about signs and wonders on Wednesday. Because there's a crazy prayer that the apostles make in Acts 4 where they say, Lord, look upon their threats and grant us the ability to speak your gospel, your word with boldness. as you stretch out your hand to heal and you perform signs and wonders through the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, right? There's this prayer that they make. And I made this statement where I said, I believe that we should be praying for signs and wonders. But what is a sign? What is a sign? Because he defines, I believe if you're going to define what a sign is, it is the glory of God being revealed to us today. That is a sign. But this is the tricky part, is so when Jesus fed the 5,000, it was the glory of God beaming down to the earth, and the result of that beam was 5,000 people got fed. Picture it a lot like the sun. When the sun breaks forth, that beam of light shines down, and what does the light do? What does that light do? It helps you to see things, helps you to see yourself. It gives you vitamin D. It's beneficial for you. It's like there's a lot of good things. Plants grow. Your house gets destroyed. You know, it's like there's a lot of good things that come from the sun, right? But it would be foolish if we just walked around all day and we never noticed the source of where that light is coming from, right? And so I think you see the analogy here, that in the same way, when we follow Jesus, there are certain fruits that happen. But how foolish would it be if we never tracked that beam right back up? You see, a sign is supposed to make you look up at the glory of God being revealed. It's supposed to make you find him. You know, sometimes, look, I will say this, that sometimes it can be very bad. We can start to receive Jesus the wrong way. You know, when you look in this passage, that's really the whole point of this 71 verses that he unpacks is there's a right way to receive me and there's a wrong way to receive me. And you see this dichotomy here in the text, that you have some people receiving Jesus wrong and you have a few people that receive Jesus right. And the people that receive Jesus right, they have tracked up that beam to see Jesus. They've tracked up that beam. But I want to first just really quickly tell you about the people that received him wrong. He comes down and he feeds the 5,000, right? And they come up and they say, man, this guy is a prophet, right? This guy must be a prophet. And it says this in verse 15 of John 6. It says, perceiving that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. See, they said, man, this guy's a prophet. This guy is very useful to us. When we're hungry, he can actually feed us. And so therefore, let's make him king because he'll keep our bellies full. And I love that when you view and try to receive Jesus wrongly, what actually did Jesus do here? He withdrew. He's like, you're looking at me as like this ticket to just feed you all the time. And that is the source, but they were not, they even looked at him wrong. They're like, okay, he's just this prophet. They didn't look at him as truly the Messiah. They didn't look at him as their Savior. They didn't look at him as their Lord. Can you imagine if you were just sitting in a crowd, let's just say this size, and I came up here and I'm like, I don't have any candy in my pocket whatsoever, so that's okay. Okay, let's say like, hey, who's thirsty in here, right? Anybody thirsty? Everybody's like, yeah, we're so thirsty. We've been in the desert all day. You know, it's like, okay. And so I said, okay, I'm going to pass this around right now to you. And everybody just drink as much as you like and pass it on to the next person, right? What if at the end, like we get to the end and then we take this cup and we just start pouring it into a bucket and it just overflows? I think you would hope that you would walk around and say, this guy is different, right? I think I should probably go to him with more than just my belly ache. I think he should be everything for me because he turned something miraculously and it shows me that he must be not on my level. And I want to inquire, I want to receive him. If I have this guy with me, I ain't got nothing to worry about. But that's not how they received him. And you see that further because Jesus left for a second. It says on the next day, the crowd remained. This is verse 22. On the next day, the crowd that remained on the other side of the sea saw that there had only been one boat there and that Jesus had not entered that boat with his disciples. And so there were some other boats that came near the place where they had eaten the bread after the Lord and had given thanks. And so when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, or his disciples, they themselves got into the boats and went to Capernaum and seeking Jesus. Now they are seeking Jesus again, and that's good. And they say, when they found him on the other side, they said, Rabbi, when did you come here? So they were wondering, how did you get here? And what I think is amazing is that Jesus had just walked on water. And Jesus does not tell them that he just walked on water. Why? Why doesn't he tell them what he just did? Because they would say, man, this dude is really, really useful. Not only will he keep our bellies full, but if we're stranded somewhere, he can walk on that water and take us away from, man, we got to make this dude king. He doesn't tell him that. This is what he says to him. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, you are not seeking me, not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. See, you're not seeking me because you tracked that sign. You saw that sign and it tracked you up to me. He said, you're just coming because I'm useful to you. See, there's a way to receive Jesus wrong. When you just look at him as being useful, today I think a lot of times when we're going through trouble, what do? We go through trouble and we run to Jesus, and what does Jesus do? He rescues us out of our trouble, but what we do right after that is key. Do we look at the rescuer out of our trouble and say, man, I've got to be with this person always? Or do we say, okay, you got me out of my trouble, let me just go and walk back over here to my boat? That's receiving him wrong. Don't receive him just because things might have gone well for you by him, and then you abandon him a couple weeks later. That's receiving him wrong. In fact, he's mad at them that they were seeking him. He's mad at them. He says, I'm telling you, you're not seeking me for the right reasons. Can you imagine? I just never thought about that. Jesus being mad at someone for seeking him. But he was. You're seeking me to fill your belly. And in fact, by the end of the day, nearly everybody walks away from Jesus. Because he's saying, you're looking at me wrong. He even tells his disciples, you want to go with him? But there's a way to receive him rightly. Worship team, you can come up on this one. There's a way to receive him rightly. Anybody that's read John chapter 6, there is a weird passage that takes place in the middle of John chapter 6. He feeds the 5,000. They receive him wrongly. Jesus goes up the mountain, right? And for some reason, I don't know why. I have no idea why. But the disciples are like, let's get out of here without Jesus, And so they hop in their boat and they start riding across the sea. And they're about 3 or 4 miles out, right? They're about 3 or 4 miles out, and the storm comes. And the waters are raging all around them. In the middle of the storm, when their fear was probably at its highest, it says they look out and they see someone, they even thought he was a ghost or something. They see someone walking on the water of the sea. You've heard this story, right? He's walking on the water. And it says that they were like, who is that? And Jesus actually says, and I think it's around verse 20 or something right there. He says, it is I, do not be afraid. Jesus says, it is I, do not be afraid. And it says this, verse 21, it says, then they were glad to take him in the boat. Another version says, they received him with gladness into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. That little passage, those 5 or 6 verses, are sandwiched in between those 71 verses talking about the bread of life. And I was always wondering, why is that there? And I believe the reason why God put that there is so that you would get a picture of what it means to receive Jesus the right way. See, everybody else was receiving Jesus because they're like, well, he will fix the problem that we're currently in. And he does fix problems that we're currently in. But you're seeking the miracle, you're not seeking the miracle worker at that point. What's interesting about this passage is that John doesn't mention at all what happened to the storm. He doesn't say when Jesus got in the boat, he calmed the seas. What the disciples realize is, as long as he's in the boat, I don't have anything to worry about. See, a lot of times we're going in our boats and you're missing the one that should be in your boat. and you say, it doesn't matter what I am going through in life. I think there's a reason why John didn't include what happened to the seas. He said, you just get in my boat. You just bring me into your boat, and you ain't got anything to worry about. You know that I'm the God of the universe, so you know that if I'm with you, there ain't nothing to fear. There's nothing to be worried about. Yeah, you might go through some choppy seas, but guess what? I'm sleeping right there in the boat. I'm asleep in the boat. You know that I have authority. You should be just like me in this boat. You should be calm and restful and at peace. But he said, you got to bring me into your boat. When he finally gets back to the other shore, he rebukes those guys again. He says, look, I'm telling you, you're seeking me for you're not seeking me because you saw the signs, you're seeking me because you got your fill of the loaves. He says, do not labor for the food that perishes, but rather labor for the food that endures to eternal life. Do you ever read the Bible and you say, I don't like that passage? You ever say that? Because especially in the Gospel of John, there are several passages that Jesus, like he makes a statement, it's like, that seems sacrilegious, Jesus. It seems sacrilegious because he says, work for the bread of eternal life. You need to work for it. I don't like that verse, right? Because I thought I was supposed to, I didn't think I was supposed to work. I didn't think I was saved by the works that I do. And what I also love about Jesus, anytime he makes one of those statements, the very next verse, he clarifies exactly what he means. You see, he was living around a bunch of people that were working. What do we need to do in order to get this bread? What do we need to do in order to get this bread? So you want us to work for that bread? What do we need to do, Jesus? Tell us what we got to do. We'll do whatever. You want us to go and make sure we bring 5 people to church next week? Right? You want us to go and do this task or that task? Is that what's going to give us this bread? And man, he just had them hooked, line, and sinker right here. He says, this is the work of God, that you believe in me. You believe in me. You just invite me into your boat. If you don't understand Jesus as the bread of life, you're not going to get it. This is why he starts with this. He says, you have got to understand that if I'm in your boat, you don't have anything to worry about. There will be trials, there will be waves, but I'm in your boat. So what do you do with that? How many of us have 1 foot? Jesus has maybe 1 foot in our boat, but we don't want to let him all the way in. The reason why he's telling you this, hey, give me your life, give me your boat, is because he wants you to trust him. He says, I am the bread of, he says it 3 times in this chapter. He says, I am the bread of life. Meaning, and then he actually says it. He says it, and I think I gave it to you in the very beginning. He says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me, you won't hunger. And whoever believes in me, he says, I will satisfy all I will change those desires to be me. But all you need to do is believe in me. And so the end of this chapter, it gets very tricky for some people. I love it, but there's a sovereignty of God aspect. He's like, anybody that the Father gives me, and I've chosen you, and it's like there's some weird things. And so I will say this: I firmly believe that if you feel like Jesus is even tugging on any parts of your string of letting him in the boat, I believe you can rejoice and say, man, God is calling me. But Pastor George and I were talking this morning. I think it's amazing how God works out conversations. We're talking this morning. He said, yeah, but what do you do for somebody that doesn't feel anything? Like doesn't feel God tugging on their heartstrings? You just say, sucks to be you. Is that what you say? And I was like, I don't know. And then I was reminded, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about their testimony. And they said something to me that was phenomenal. They went to this revival, and there was some sadness in their heart, but like it wasn't nothing changed. And he even stated, and I want him to share it with you way more beautifully than I'm probably about to butcher it, but he was on his knees at the altar with everybody else, and it didn't seem like he really wanted to be there. But he didn't want to get up, because and look like an idiot, and get called out by the pastor like, what are you doing? Get back down. He didn't want to look like an idiot, so he just stayed there. And eventually the pastor said a prayer and said, hey, I want you to pray after me. And he says, I want you to invite Jesus into your heart and ask him to change your life. And it didn't seem like this person didn't even know if it was real type of deal. I didn't feel him tugging on my heart there. And so he changed his prayer a little bit and he says, Jesus, if you are who you say you are, then I do invite you to my heart and I ask that you would change my life. And God changed his life. God changed his life. So even if you don't feel God tugging on your heart, say, God, if you say your promises are true, if you really do say you are the bread of life, then I need you to change my life. And let's trust him on his word. You've got to accept him as the bread of life. You have to accept him as the bread of life. And when you do, your life will become clear. This is how we walk like Jesus. So let's stand together.